You have about 90 seconds to decide what kind of officer you want everyone to remember. Brigadier General Marcus Reed said it quietly, almost gently, while kneeling on the sun-warmed shoulder of a two-lane road less than half a mile from the eastern gate of Langley Air Force Base. His hands rested where Officer Daniel Whitmore had ordered them, visible and still, and his dark gray jacket was already gathering dust near the knees. Traffic had slowed. A delivery driver watched from his cab. A woman outside a coffee shop held her phone at chest level, recording without saying a word. And somewhere beyond the security fence, too far away to see but close enough to feel, a low mechanical rumble rolled across the Virginia sky. Whitmore narrowed his eyes. 90 seconds until what? Marcus looked toward the horizon. He did not answer. That silence irritated Whitmore more than shouting would have. To him, Marcus's composure looked like arrogance, the practiced calm of a man who believed ordinary rules did not apply to him. But Marcus had spent more than 25 years learning that calm was not surrender. Calm was control. It was the difference between reacting to a moment and understanding it. The officer stepped closer, one hand near his radio. "You think this is some kind of game?" Marcus slowly turned his head. His expression held no fear, no challenge, only a tired kind of certainty. "No, officer. I think you're making a decision." Whitmore gave a short, humorless laugh. "I'm doing my job." Behind him, his patrol lights flashed red and blue across the black government SUV parked on the roadside, painting brief streaks of color across its polished doors. On the rear seat, barely visible through the tinted window, sat a small wooden presentation case engraved with a silver eagle and a name Whitmore had never bothered to read. Marcus's phone vibrated inside the vehicle for the fourth time. The screen lit up with a message from Colonel Rebecca Hayes. "SIR, formation is airborne. ETA 2 minutes." Whitmore did not see it. He had already decided what kind of man was kneeling in front of him. That was the problem. Not the missing information. Not the unanswered questions. The decision had come first, and everything else had been forced to fit inside it. Marcus glanced toward an elderly man standing near a pickup truck across the road. The stranger wore a faded Air Force cap and stared at Marcus with growing recognition, as if trying to place a face he had seen somewhere important. Whitmore noticed the look and snapped, "Keep moving, sir." The old man didn't move. Then the sound came again, deeper this time. A distant thunder with rhythm. Not a storm. Engines. Several of them. Whitmore looked up for half a second, then back down at Marcus. "Last chance. Tell me what you're doing here." Marcus breathed in slowly. The air smelled of hot pavement, cut grass, and jet fuel carried faintly on the wind. "I already told you." Whitmore shook his head. "And I don't believe you." Marcus's eyes settled on the officer's badge, then on the body camera mounted above it. "Then make sure that camera is running." Whitmore's face tightened. "Why?" Marcus looked toward the sky as the rumble grew louder, powerful enough now to turn heads along the road. "Because in about a minute, you're going to wish you had recorded every word." 30 minutes earlier, Marcus Reed had been standing alone beside a small memorial garden just outside the eastern edge of the base, where a row of weathered plaques carried the names of airmen who had never made it home. He had arrived without ceremony, without an aide, and without the dark blue service uniform that usually made people straighten when he entered a room. That morning he wore a charcoal jacket, a pale blue shirt, and simple black shoes. To anyone passing by, he looked like a quiet middle-aged man taking a few private minutes before work. That was exactly what he wanted. In his right hand, he held a small challenge coin worn smooth along the edges. One side carried the insignia of an old fighter squadron. The other carried the name of Captain Thomas Avery, the closest friend Marcus had ever lost. For several seconds, Marcus said nothing. The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere beyond the fence, ground crews prepared aircraft for the morning formation. A distant engine rose, faded, then returned. Marcus looked down at the coin and remembered being 26 years old, standing beside Thomas on a runway in Nevada. Both of them convinced that courage meant never showing uncertainty. Years had taught Marcus something different. Courage was knowing exactly what could go wrong and choosing discipline anyway. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. Colonel Rebecca Hayes. He let it ring once before answering. "Reed." Rebecca's voice was professional but familiar. "Sir, the flight schedule is confirmed. The formation will pass the eastern corridor just after 10. Marcus checked his watch. Understood. Security detail is asking where you are. Marcus allowed himself the smallest smile. Tell them I am exactly where I said I would be. There was a pause. Rebecca knew better than to argue, but she tried anyway. General, there is a reason senior commanders travel with people who know where they are. And there is a reason old friends deserve 5 quiet minutes without a staff meeting. Rebecca exhaled softly. Yes, sir. Marcus ended the call and placed the coin back into a small wooden presentation case inside the rear seat of the government sport utility vehicle. He closed the door and stood for one final moment facing the memorial. Still keeping me on schedule, Tom, he murmured. Then he turned toward the road. He had driven less than half a mile when he noticed the patrol car behind him. At first, he thought nothing of it. He reduced his speed to 35 miles per hour and kept both hands steady on the wheel. The flashing lights appeared seconds later. Marcus checked his mirrors, signaled, and pulled onto the shoulder. Officer Daniel Whitmore stepped from the patrol car and approached slowly. His eyes moved first to the government plates, then to Marcus, then back to the vehicle as though the combination did not make sense. Marcus lowered the window. Good morning, officer. Whitmore did not return the greeting. License and registration. Marcus reached carefully toward the center console. Of course. Whitmore watched every movement. Whose vehicle is this? Marcus handed him the requested documents. It is assigned to me. Whitmore looked at the paperwork, then at Marcus again. Assigned by who? Marcus studied the officer's expression for half a second. The question was ordinary. The tone was not. The United States government. Whitmore gave a faint smile that carried no warmth. That is a pretty big answer. Marcus remained calm. It is also the accurate one. And in that brief moment, before any accusation had been spoken aloud, Marcus understood that this stop was no longer about a license plate. Whitmore looked down at the registration again, but the longer he studied it, the less interested he seemed in what it actually said. Marcus noticed the shift immediately. It was subtle, almost invisible, but familiar. The officer had stopped searching for an explanation and started searching for confirmation. Step out of the vehicle, Whitmore said. Marcus kept both hands visible on the steering wheel. May I ask why? Whitmore's jaw tightened. Because I told you to. Marcus gave a small nod, opened the door slowly, and stepped onto the shoulder. The morning sun had climbed higher now, throwing a hard white glare across the road. Cars moved past at reduced speed. A few drivers turned their heads. Whitmore circled the sport utility vehicle, studying the government plates as though they were evidence of something improper. You said this vehicle was assigned to you. That is correct. What do you do? Marcus paused. Not because he had anything to hide, but because he had already given the man everything necessary to understand the situation. I serve in the United States Air Force. Whitmore looked him over from head to toe. No uniform, no visible rank, no escort, nothing that matched the image in his mind. Doing what? Marcus met his eyes. Command. Whitmore gave a short laugh. Command what? Marcus did not answer immediately. The silence stretched just long enough to expose the question beneath the question. Whitmore was not asking for clarification. He was asking Marcus to prove that a man who looked like him could occupy a position the officer had already decided did not belong to him. My identification is in my wallet, Marcus said. You are welcome to verify it. Whitmore held out his hand. Marcus moved slowly, removed the wallet, and passed over the military identification card. For a moment, Whitmore stared at it. His expression did not change. Anybody can print something that looks official. Marcus felt the weight of those words settle between them. That card is issued by the Department of Defense. So you say? Whitmore turned it over, then back again. And this vehicle? Also government issued. Convenient. Marcus inhaled slowly through his nose. He had spent years in rooms where one careless reaction could affect hundreds of people. He knew what control felt like. He also knew what it cost. Officer, you have my license, registration, and military identification. You can verify all 3. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. You seem pretty confident for somebody being questioned. Marcus almost smiled at the absurdity of it. Would you prefer I be nervous? Whitmore did not answer. Across the road, the older man in the faded Air Force cap had stopped beside his pickup truck. His name was Ethan Cole, though Marcus did not know that yet. Ethan stared at Marcus with a look that was becoming less curious and more certain. He had spent 22 years working aircraft maintenance, And there was something about the man's face he remembered from base ceremonies, retirement programs, and official photographs. He squinted toward the road, trying to place the name. Whitmore followed his gaze and immediately stepped between Marcus and the older man. "Is there a problem over there?" Ethan shook his head but did not leave. Marcus's phone vibrated again inside the vehicle. Whitmore glanced toward the sound. "Who keeps calling you?" "My office." "What office?" Marcus looked at him carefully. "You can find out by verifying the identification in your hand." Whitmore's face hardened. "Do not tell me how to do my job." The words came faster now. Marcus recognized the pattern. Each answer that should have reduced suspicion somehow increased it. Cooperation became attitude. Credentials became deception. Calm became defiance. The facts were not changing. Only the story Whitmore had chosen to believe. Then the officer looked through the rear window and spotted the wooden presentation case on the seat. "What is in the box?" Marcus turned his head slightly. "A medal." Whitmore looked back at him. "For who?" Marcus held his gaze. "For a man who earned it." Whitmore kept his eyes on the wooden case as if the answer had only made him more suspicious. "Open it." Marcus remained still. "There is no reason to search that case." "I did not ask whether you thought there was a reason." The officer's voice sharpened, carrying across the shoulder of the road. Ethan Cole shifted beside his pickup truck, his attention fixed on the scene now. Marcus glanced toward the base fence in the distance, then back at Whitmore. "The case contains a military decoration and personal effects belonging to a fallen officer." For the first time, something flickered across Whitmore's face, but it vanished almost immediately. "Then you should have no problem opening it." Marcus felt the old familiar pressure rise inside him, the kind that came before difficult decisions in command rooms and briefing halls. He had learned long ago that authority revealed itself most clearly when someone had the power to escalate and chose restraint instead. "You already have enough information to verify who I am," he said. "Make the call." Whitmore stepped closer. "You keep acting like you are in charge here." Marcus looked at him with steady eyes. "I am not trying to be in charge of you." That answer should have lowered the temperature. It did not. Whitmore seemed to hear only resistance. "Turn around." Marcus did not move immediately. "For what purpose?" "Because I am giving you a lawful instruction." Marcus studied him for one long second, then slowly turned. The passing traffic seemed louder now. Tires whispered against the pavement. A bird called from somewhere beyond the trees. His phone vibrated again inside the sport utility vehicle, ignored. Whitmore continued, "Get down on your knees." Ethan took a step away from his truck. "Officer, come on." Whitmore looked across the road. "Stay out of this." Marcus closed his eyes for half a second. In that brief darkness, another morning returned to him. Years earlier, he had stood before a group of young pilots after a difficult training mission. They had been angry, embarrassed, eager to blame weather, equipment, each other. Marcus had told them something none of them wanted to hear. Discipline is not what you show when everything is going your way. Discipline is what remains when your pride tells you to make things worse. Now, on the side of a Virginia road, he heard his own words as clearly as if he were standing in that briefing room again. He lowered himself carefully to one knee, then the other. Whitmore watched, satisfied. Marcus looked down at the pale dust covering the fabric of his trousers. There was no shame in following an order to prevent a bad situation from becoming worse. The shame belonged somewhere else. Ethan stared harder. Recognition finally broke across his face. "Wait," he whispered. He looked from Marcus to the base, then back again. "I know that man." Whitmore turned sharply. "Sir, I told you to stay back." Ethan raised both hands to show he was not approaching. "You need to check his identification again." Whitmore's expression hardened. "I already did." "Then read it." Marcus lifted his gaze. For the first time, he and Ethan made eye contact. The older veteran's face had changed completely. The uncertainty was gone. Marcus gave the smallest shake of his head. "Not yet." Ethan understood enough to stop speaking. Whitmore noticed the exchange. "What was that?" "Nothing," Marcus said. "Do not play games with me." Marcus looked toward the officer's body camera. A small indicator light blinked against the dark uniform. "Good." Then the wind shifted. From beyond the base came a low vibration, distant but unmistakable. Marcus checked the time on the dashboard clock through the open vehicle door. Less than 2 minutes. He looked back at Whitmore. "Officer, verify my credentials now." Whitmore stared down at him. "You are in no position to give me instructions." Marcus's voice became quieter. I am trying to give you a chance. The vibration in the air grew stronger, but Whitmore still refused to look toward the base. His attention stayed fixed on Marcus, as though the man kneeling before him had become a problem that needed to be solved rather than a person who had already provided every reasonable answer. Marcus could hear the faint crackle of the patrol radio behind Whitmore. A dispatcher was speaking quickly, mentioning the Eastern Gate, a government vehicle, and a senior Air Force contact. Whitmore reached back and lowered the volume without responding. Marcus noticed. So did Ethan. Officer, Marcus said, his voice calm. Your radio is trying to tell you something. Whitmore frowned. You worry about yourself. Marcus looked at the body camera again. The small light was still blinking. That mattered. I am, he said. And I am also trying to prevent you from making this worse. Whitmore let out a quiet breath through his nose. You really do think you are somebody important? Marcus held his gaze. That should not matter. The answer seemed to confuse him. Whitmore had expected a threat, a name, a rank, some attempt to use status as a shield. Marcus offered none of those things. If I were unemployed, Marcus continued, my documents would still deserve to be checked. If I were a mechanic, a teacher, or a delivery driver, you would still have a responsibility to verify the facts before deciding what they mean. Ethan lowered his eyes for a moment, absorbing the words. Whitmore did not. Save the speech. Marcus looked toward the road. Another car had slowed, and two people inside were watching. The woman near the coffee shop was still recording. The scene was no longer private. Maybe it never had been. His phone vibrated again inside the vehicle. This time the screen remained visible through the open door. Colonel Rebecca Hayes. Command Operations. Whitmore glanced at it. Who is Rebecca Hayes? A colonel in the United States Air Force. Whitmore gave a skeptical smile. Of course she is. Marcus almost felt sorry for him then. Not because Whitmore was trapped, but because he had been given exit after exit and kept choosing the same direction. Answer the call, Marcus said. No. Call the base. No. Run the identification again. Whitmore's expression tightened. I said stop telling me how to do my job. The radio crackled once more, louder this time because the dispatcher repeated the message. Unit 12, confirm whether you have contact with a Marcus Reed near the East Access Road. Security liaison is requesting immediate status. Ethan looked at Whitmore. Marcus said nothing. For several seconds, the only sound was the low hum of passing traffic and the growing thunder beyond the trees. Whitmore finally lifted the radio. Dispatch, I have a subject claiming military affiliation. Situation under control. Marcus slowly raised his eyes. Subject. Whitmore ignored him. The dispatcher answered almost immediately. Unit 12, verify full identification. Air Force Security is asking whether the individual is Brigadier General Marcus Reed. Silence. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, as if the last missing piece had finally fallen into place. Whitmore stared at the radio, then at Marcus, then back at the military identification card still in his hand. For the first time that morning, uncertainty reached his face. Marcus did not smile. He did not rise. He simply said, now read the card again. Whitmore looked down. The words had been there the entire time. Rank. Service branch. Full name. Nothing had changed except his willingness to see them. Before he could answer, Marcus's phone stopped vibrating, and a new message appeared across the screen. Formation airborne. 1 minute out. Marcus glanced toward the horizon. The sound was no longer distant. It was approaching fast, deep and steady, carrying across the morning sky like a promise already in motion. Officer Whitmore, Marcus said, this is the moment where you decide whether this becomes a mistake you correct or a choice you defend. Whitmore stood motionless for a moment, the radio still in his hand, the identification card still between his fingers. The name had not changed. The rank had not changed. The facts had not changed. Only the meaning he was willing to give them had changed. Across the road, Ethan Cole slowly removed his faded Air Force cap. He looked at Marcus with the kind of recognition that came from years of service, ceremonies, photographs, and names spoken with respect. General Reed, Ethan said softly. Whitmore turned toward him. I told you to stay back. Ethan did not argue. He simply held the cap against his chest. I know who he is. Marcus remained on his knees, calm and still. He did not use Ethan's words as permission to rise. He did not reach for the status Whitmore had finally begun to understand. Instead, he watched the officer's face and waited. Whitmore looked again at the card. "Brigadier General," he said, almost to himself. Marcus answered quietly, "Yes." For several seconds, no one moved. Then Whitmore seemed to recover his pride before he recovered his judgment. "Rank does not put you above procedure." Marcus nodded once. "Correct." The answer unsettled him. "Then stay where you are." Ethan looked across the road in disbelief. Marcus lowered his eyes briefly. There it was. Another exit refused. Another opportunity to correct course abandoned because correction would require admitting the original assumption had been wrong. Whitmore reached toward the restraints on his duty belt. Marcus looked up. His voice remained measured. "Officer, think carefully before you do that." Whitmore paused. "Is that a threat?" "No." Marcus glanced toward the blinking body camera. "It is advice." The patrol radio came alive again. "Unit 12, Air Force Security confirms Brigadier General Marcus Reed is expected in the area. Military liaison is en route to your location. Do not impede scheduled movement." Whitmore stared at the radio, but something stubborn had taken hold now. Maybe it was embarrassment. Maybe fear of looking weak in front of the people watching. Maybe the simple human instinct to defend a bad decision once too much pride had been invested in it. Whatever it was, Marcus recognized it immediately. He had seen the same thing in command rooms after failed plans. The most dangerous moment was often not the first mistake. It was the moment someone decided protecting the mistake mattered more than fixing it. "Stand up," Whitmore said. Marcus rose slowly. "Turn around." Marcus complied. Whitmore secured the restraints around his wrists without force, but the quiet metallic click seemed louder than the traffic, louder than the radio, louder even than the approaching aircraft. Ethan's face fell. The woman, near the coffee shop, raised her phone higher. Marcus looked straight ahead toward the distant base gate. "Once you put those on me," he said, "this stops being a misunderstanding." Whitmore answered, "You are being detained until I sort this out." Marcus gave a slow breath. "You already sorted it out. You just did not like the answer." Then headlights appeared near the eastern access road. One dark military vehicle turned onto the public roadway. Then another. Then a third. Whitmore saw them and finally looked uncertain. Doors opened almost as soon as the convoy stopped. Uniformed personnel stepped out, moving quickly but calmly. At the front was Colonel Rebecca Hayes. She took 3 steps toward the scene, then stopped when she saw Marcus standing beside the patrol car with his hands restrained behind him. Her expression changed. Not anger, not confusion, something colder. Professional disbelief. She walked forward, stopped several feet away, came to attention, and raised her hand in a formal salute. "General Reed." Whitmore's face lost its color. Marcus returned the salute as best he could with his hands behind him. Then the sky began to roar. The roar arrived before the aircraft came into view, rolling across the road in a deep wave that made every conversation stop. Heads turned toward the sky. Whitmore looked up at last. 4 fighter jets appeared over the eastern horizon in tight formation, silver-gray shapes cutting across the bright Virginia morning with exact spacing and effortless precision. Marcus watched them approach without changing his expression. He knew the route. He knew the timing. He knew the formation had been scheduled days earlier to honor pilots lost in service and to mark the opening of a command ceremony at the base. But to everyone standing on that roadside, the timing felt almost impossible. Colonel Rebecca Hayes lowered her salute and looked directly at Whitmore. "Officer, remove the restraints from General Reed." Whitmore hesitated. "I am conducting an investigation." Rebecca's voice remained controlled. "Your dispatcher has verified his identity. Air Force Security has verified his identity. His government vehicle has been verified. What exactly remains unclear." Whitmore looked toward Marcus, then toward the growing number of uniformed personnel behind Rebecca. No one shouted. No one threatened him. That somehow made the silence heavier. The jets crossed overhead, their engines filling the air for several seconds before beginning to fade toward the west. Ethan Cole stood beside his pickup with his Air Force cap pressed against his chest. When the formation passed directly above, he straightened instinctively and raised a salute of his own. Several military personnel did the same. Marcus remained still. His hands were still behind him. That image seemed to strike Rebecca harder than anything else. "Officer Whitmore," she said, "the restraints." Whitmore finally reached forward and removed them. Marcus brought his hands around slowly, flexed his fingers once, then adjusted the cuffs of his jacket. There was no triumph on his face. No smile. No satisfaction. He looked first at Rebecca. Colonel Hayes. Sir, is the formation on schedule? Rebecca seemed surprised by the question. Yes, General. They crossed the eastern marker exactly on time. Marcus nodded. Good. Whitmore stared at him. That is what you were counting down to. Marcus looked toward the fading aircraft. Partly. The word landed quietly. Whitmore swallowed. I did not know who you were. Marcus turned back to him. That is not the defense you think it is. The roadside went still again. Even Rebecca said nothing. Marcus stepped closer, leaving several feet between them. You had my identification. You had the registration. You had confirmation from dispatch. You had a witness telling you to look again. None of that mattered until people you considered important arrived. Whitmore opened his mouth, but Marcus continued. And that is the problem. His tone remained calm, almost instructional. If my rank is the reason you now believe I deserve basic respect, then you have learned the wrong lesson. Ethan lowered his salute. The woman near the coffee shop was still recording. Marcus noticed her phone, but did not object. In fact, he turned slightly, so the body camera on Whitmore's uniform was clearly visible. Is your camera still recording? Whitmore glanced down. Yes. Marcus nodded. Good. Keep it that way. Rebecca looked at him. She understood immediately. Marcus was not interested in making the moment disappear behind military channels or private apologies. He wanted the facts preserved exactly as they had happened. Whitmore's voice became quieter. General, I made a mistake. Marcus studied him for several seconds. Maybe. Whitmore looked confused. Marcus continued. A mistake is what happens when the facts are unclear. What happens after the facts become clear is a choice. The last echo of the fighter jets disappeared into the distance. Marcus looked toward the base, then back at Whitmore. Now we are going to find out which one this was. For several seconds, nobody answered Marcus. The road seemed strangely quiet after the jets had passed, as if the entire morning had been holding its breath and was only now beginning to exhale. Whitmore looked down at the ground. Rebecca Hayes watched him with the expression of someone who had already moved beyond surprise and into assessment. Ethan Cole remained beside his truck, still holding his cap. The woman near the coffee shop lowered her phone slightly, but kept recording. Marcus turned toward Rebecca. Colonel, contact base security and request that they preserve every communication related to this stop. Yes, sir. Dispatch audio, vehicle verification, identification checks, everything. Rebecca nodded and stepped aside to make the call. Whitmore looked up. General, I said I made a mistake. Marcus faced him again. And I heard you. Then what else do you want? The question came out more defensively than Whitmore intended. Marcus noticed. I want the truth to survive the moment. Whitmore frowned. Marcus gestured toward the body camera. That camera tells one story. Dispatch tells another part. The witnesses tell another. None of them should disappear just because this became embarrassing. Whitmore looked toward the patrol car. For the first time, he seemed to notice how many people had seen everything. Marcus continued. You thought the problem was that you stopped the wrong man. Whitmore said nothing. It was not. Marcus's voice remained even. The problem was that you decided who I was before you knew anything about me. Ethan slowly nodded. Marcus looked toward him. Sir, would you be willing to give a statement? Ethan answered immediately. Absolutely. Whitmore shifted his weight. This is getting blown out of proportion. Rebecca, still on the phone, looked back at him. Marcus did not raise his voice. That sentence has protected a lot of bad decisions. Whitmore's face tightened. I followed procedure. Then the review should prove that. Marcus let the words settle. No threat. No argument. Just a standard applied in both directions. A few minutes later, another patrol vehicle approached and pulled in behind Whitmore's cruiser. Chief Aaron Mitchell stepped out. He was broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, and moved with the careful speed of a man who already knew the situation was serious. He glanced at the military convoy, at Rebecca, at Marcus, then at Whitmore. Officer Whitmore, step over here. Whitmore started to speak. Mitchell raised one hand. Not yet. He turned to Marcus. General Reed, I am Chief Aaron Mitchell. I have been briefed on the basic facts. I want to apologize for what happened here. Marcus looked at him steadily. Chief, I appreciate the apology, but I do not want this handled as a courtesy to me. Mitchell nodded slowly. Understood. Handle it as if I were a civilian with no rank, no convoy, and nobody important returning my calls. That landed harder than anything else Marcus had said. Mitchell looked toward Whitmore, then back at Marcus. That is fair. It is more than fair, Marcus replied. It is the standard. Mitchell took a breath. Officer Whitmore, turn over your body camera and your patrol vehicle recording system for review. You are relieved from field duty pending an internal investigation. Whitmore stared at him. Chief. Mitchell's tone stayed calm. This is not a debate. Marcus watched without satisfaction. Justice, to him, had never been about humiliation. It was about accountability that did not depend on who happened to be watching. Rebecca returned. Sir, Air Force security has preserved the relevant communications. Marcus nodded. Good. Then he looked at the road where he had been ordered to kneel. The dust was still there. The marks on his trousers were still there. But now the question was larger than what had happened to him. Chief Mitchell, Marcus said, when you review this, do not start with me. Start with the complaints that came before me. Find the people who did not have a colonel arriving in 3 vehicles. Find the people nobody recognized. That is where the real story is. Chief Mitchell did exactly what Marcus asked. The review did not begin with rank, ceremony, or the embarrassment of detaining a senior Air Force commander. It began with records, complaints, traffic stops, body camera logs, reports that had been filed, closed, and forgotten. Within days, investigators found a pattern that had been easy to dismiss when each incident was viewed alone. Drivers questioned longer than necessary. Credentials doubted without cause. Routine stops turned into confrontations because suspicion had been treated as evidence. Not every complaint was identical, and not every accusation was proven, but together they revealed something the department could no longer ignore. Whitmore had not made one isolated bad judgment. He had developed a habit of deciding who people were before learning the facts. Chief Mitchell placed him on administrative leave while an independent review moved forward. Training records were reopened. Supervisory decisions were examined. Several earlier complaints were restored for reconsideration. Marcus followed the process from a distance. He did not call demanding punishment. He did not use military authority to influence the outcome. When Rebecca asked whether he wanted regular updates, he shook his head. Only if they need my statement. She studied him. After what happened, that is all you want. Marcus looked through the window of his office toward the runway. I want the system to work when nobody with stars on his shoulders is involved. A week later, Ethan Cole was invited to the base for a small memorial ceremony. Marcus found him standing near the same wooden presentation case that Whitmore had questioned beside the road. Inside was the decoration belonging to Captain Thomas Avery. Ethan looked at the medal, then at Marcus. I recognized you from a command ceremony 3 years ago. Marcus smiled faintly. You tried to help before anyone else showed up. Ethan shrugged. I knew something was wrong. Marcus's expression turned serious. That matters more than recognizing me. Outside, aircraft engines hummed in the distance. There was no dramatic formation this time. No roaring sky. Just ordinary work continuing as it always did. Chief Mitchell attended the ceremony as well. Afterward, he approached Marcus privately. The department is changing its traffic stop review policy, he said. Supervisors will examine patterns, not just individual complaints. We should have done it sooner. Marcus nodded. Then make sure it lasts longer than the headlines. Mitchell looked toward the runway. You know, most people think the jets were the moment everything changed. Marcus followed his gaze. They were memorable, but not the point. Marcus smiled. No. He thought back to that roadside, to the dust on his trousers, the flashing patrol lights, the identification card that had contained the truth from the beginning. The fighter jets had not made him worthy of dignity. His rank had not made him worthy of fairness. The convoy had not made his words true. Those things had only forced others to see what should have been visible before any of them arrived. Months later, when Marcus spoke to a class of young officers and airmen, he did not tell them the story as one about a general who had been treated badly. He told them it was about the danger of assumptions. The easiest person to respect is the one whose title you already know, he said. Character begins when you offer that same respect to someone whose name means nothing to you. Then he paused. Power does not reveal who deserves dignity. It reveals whether you understood dignity before power entered the room.